our wine went to a wine tasting event and sort of participated in a wine tasting event, and I met some really cool people. Among them, Reuven, who makes whiskey. So dagan v'yain, right? Whiskey is the dagan in this situation, as opposed to bread. It also seems like a very worthwhile endeavor for me. I'm trying to convince Reuven to do something which I think is very, very important, which is make bourbon that is completely kasher lePesach, for a number of reasons. First of all, I'm sure many of you, like me, are horrified by the idea of having a whole week where one can't drink whiskey or bourbon.
8 days. You must translate that for my wife.
זה נורא נורא מפחיד ומבהל ששבוע, כאילו יותר משבוע במהלך השנה שאי אפשר לשתות וויסקי בפסח. אז אני ממש מעודד את ראובן לעשות וויסקי של הפסח. Many, probably not too many people here, but perhaps, there are people out there for whom this would be finally the excuse, the reason they've been looking for to abandon the silly and mistaken minhag of not eating Kitniyot on Pesach. So, finally, B'ezrat Hashem, if there's a whiskey that's entirely from corn, then maybe people would switch over and really bring Am Yisrael together in this way. And I already thought of a name for this whiskey, Unicorn, because it would be only corn. And so hopefully B'ezrat Hashem in future years we'll have more and more dagan v'yain. So I'm gonna, because I'm also gonna do a Dvar Torah later, I'm gonna try to keep this short. Although I'm an academic, so I kind of have a weakness for captive audiences. But nevertheless, I'll try to limit my talking and give other people opportunities too. So I want to do to show mainly, I think, 3 wines. There are more. So if there's room, as it were, then we can move on to other wines. I think that the interesting thing about wine is not whether it's good wine or great wine, but that it's different and interesting. And so I try to make interesting different wines by experimenting with how we make the wine. There are a number of things that go into that. The varietal, right? What kind of grapes you use, not just whether it's Merlot or Cabernet Franc or Shiraz, but where was it grown? Was it high altitude? Was it a very difficult summer for the grapes, like this summer? When were the grapes picked? I measure with a refractometer the amount of sugar in the grapes, and that makes quite a bit of a difference as well.
Why was this a difficult summer for grapes?
Very hot.
I didn't notice that.
Well, I think the grapes did. So that's in.
Well, it was actually a rather mild summer.
Well, for some of the varietals, it's been a difficult summer. The Merlot is fine. The Shiraz is. So. Well, it's not just heat. It's a combination of things, but heat, humidity, dryness, all sorts of things. Yeah. And of course, when do you pick it? A bit early, a bit late. The job of fruit is to convert acidity to sugar. Acidity is good for some things in the wine. Sugar is good for other things in the wine. So you have to pick the timing right. And of course, then there's the different kinds of fermentation, which I can speak about endlessly, and I won't. But what I generally try to do is use the natural yeasts that are already on the grape. So I don't add additional yeast to wine or to other things. Usually. Sometimes I've experimented with, when the situation called for it, with adding, wine-specific yeast strains, sometimes after a natural yeast fermentation, to kind of raise the alcohol level a little bit, because industrial yeast, they have a higher ethanol tolerance than the natural yeast. But many wines I've really not touched with yeast at all, and so maybe there's some residual sugar sometimes that is barely perceptible, but it's there, and that can be very interesting. And of course, using natural yeast means that there's fair free market competition between like a million different strains, really a few dozen meaningful players, and they all have their own specialty in terms of the metabolites, the kind of smells and tastes and volatiles that they produce. So that means that every vintage and every batch is going to be quite different and unique and interesting, hopefully good and tasty as well. Ultimately, wine is something that, it should feel good to drink when you're thirsty. So since at least for now we don't have a huge amount of people, I thought that I would do two things. First, I want to open a Shiraz that I made in 2020, so approximately 4 years ago. And I want to do something that I have invented a word for, that I call a chad keren, which is not a unicorn. It's basically when I have two wines that were made from the same grapes, from the same vineyard, but by two totally different people. And so I have something like that. So the Shiraz that I picked on Har Gerizim, someone else did that as well, a sort of commercial winery, and they made a wine, I made a wine, and then we can taste and compare and contrast.
So we're about to taste a wine, the grapes of which were grown on Har Gerizim?
Yes.
One of these two?
No, it's right there. I'll get it in just a second. And then we'll do these two. I have a lot of these two wines, and I'd like to sell some if possible, if people like. And this is from last year, from 2023. And so I think I always like to show wine that's recent, the recent product of the Yekev. And so we're going to taste a Merlot that one of the sort of unique things about it that you'll be able to taste is that it's underwent a very long maceration, which means that in simple language, it sat there with the klipot, with the skins of the grapes and the seeds and everything for a very long time. It gives this wine very Italian, kind of wooden, austere taste that over time becomes smoother and more palatable.
How long, more or less?
More than 2 weeks. In Italy, sometimes with Barolo and Nebbiolo, they do it for 50 days, which is crazy, and then you can't drink it for 20 years. But I don't have that kind of patience. And then we're going to do Argaman, which is wine. It's a Zan Eretz Israeli. It's a varietal that is unique to Israel. It was bred in a agricultural institute in Israel from a cross between Suzao, which is a Portuguese varietal, and Carignan, which is a French varietal. So it's really have Ashkenazi, Sfaradi. It's a kibbutz galuyot kind of varietal, and it's unique first and foremost in its color. I've never seen wine with this kind of color, but also there are some very intense fruity and bodily kind of elements to it. So I think I'll open the wines. First, the head-to-head competition between the Shirazes, and then I'll open these as well. And there are glasses right there. Please hold on to your glass, and we'll get to drinking. And if
Sure,
why not?